Hey, everybody. We're going to get started. I see a few hands. We're going to go ahead and get started with the Ask Me Anything. First of all, I want to thank you guys all for coming in. We've still got some people coming in the room, but we'll launch right into this. For the Ask Me Anything about Airstreams presentation, just before I launch into it, let me give you a little bit of background here for those of you who don't know who I am. I am Rich Luhr. I am an Airstream owner, just like you guys. I've done a lot of Airstream things over the last 20 years, including writing some books about Airstreams, The Nearly Complete Guide to Maintaining an Airstream. Actually, that title is wrong. It's The Nearly Complete Guide to Airstream Maintenance, which is available on Amazon and is available on the Airstream Life store. The Newbies Guide to Airstreaming, some other things. I publish Airstream Life magazine. I co-own Air Gear, which we sell Airstream accessories with my wife, Tothi. And so all of this has given me a lot of Airstream experience, which I'm going to try to share with you today in the form of a bunch of questions. I do want to let you know, first of all, we're recording this meeting. You're not going to be visible. You're not audible. So feel free to say anything you want. I won't hear you. But we will record it and we'll post it again on our website and on YouTube. The goal here is just to try to answer as many questions on any subject related to Airstreaming as I possibly can. And we got a lot of questions. There were so many questions. We've got dozens and dozens of questions. We really can't answer them all. We're going to try to answer as many as we can, but I really had to cut out, because we had to cut some out. We had to cut out the ones that related to specific problems related to an individual Airstream. So a number of people wrote in questions saying, I'm having this particular problem. And the reason I can't answer those questions in this AMA is simply because the answers are too involved. They usually require a little bit more diagnostics. There's some very mysterious problems going on there. People are having trouble with their electrical or their water pump or this or that. They've brought it to the dealer. The dealer hasn't been able to solve the problem. I would love to be able to sort of wave my magic wand and say, aha, here's the problem. And sometimes that can happen. But in most cases, more diagnosis is needed. Usually when there's that kind of problem, something is going wrong that is very specific to your Airstream, and there's been some assumptions made and better troubleshooting is required. And so as a result, I just can't get to those. So we had to skip some of those questions. I have no idea what that handwriting says. I got a note there. I can't. Oh, yes. And there is no chat in this. So unfortunately, we won't be able to take your questions as we had planned to. We didn't realize, because we're doing a meeting format, not a webinar format, there's actually no ability for us to have live chat during the conversation. But not to worry. A lot of people ask the same types of questions over and over again. So in some of those cases, we've picked one question that's representative of the kind of question that people are having, and we're going to answer that one, and it will probably answer 5 other questions. So we've lumped them into various categories, the first category being electrical questions. And here's the first question that came up. Please explain the function and different lights on the push button battery disconnect switch. This may seem really elementary, but it's surprising how many people are confused by this little switch. If you have, most Airstream trailers come with this battery disconnect, which is an electronic battery disconnect. It looks just like the one in the picture, and it says use and store. You would think that would be obvious, but I know I was confused by it when I first encountered one of these. So it should be in the use position when you are using the Airstream. In other words, if you don't want the batteries to be disconnected, make sure it says use and the red light is on like there is in the picture. When you're not using the Airstream, you are storing the Airstream. So it should be in the store position. When you put it in the store position, it cuts off most things from the battery. What it cuts off from the battery depends on exactly what trailer you have and what model year it is. Until recently, it would disconnect everything from the battery that wasn't directly wired to the battery, which would include just about everything in the trailer except the propane leak detector. In later Airstreams, they've changed that, starting, I think, in 2023. And now when you put it in the store position, it disconnects absolutely everything, including the propane leak detector. Your mileage may vary, but that's basically how that switch works. Can you please explain the wiring setup when installing a Victron Smart Shunt with 2 LiFePO batteries in parallel? That's very specific. Normally, this would be something I could answer, but as it turns out, when you buy a Victron Smart Shunt, they give you a very good quick installation guide. And even though the question is about having 2 batteries in parallel, the disconnection procedure is the same. You're going to connect the Smart Shunt to one of the 2 batteries in the way that they describe it. It's pretty straightforward. Next question. Our Airstream does not have the new power cord, but rather the old, long, and heavy one. What recommendation and lighter weight options do you recommend for a 50 amp cord? Well, good news and bad news. First of all, copper is copper. So pretty much all 50-foot cords are going to weigh about the same. The solution, if you want a lighter cord, is to get a shorter cord, and then you can get a lighter cord. But a 50 amp cord is going to be heavy. That's just the nature of the beast. It's a lot of copper in that cord. And what you can do is get maybe a 10, 15 foot, 20 foot cord, whatever suits your needs on a regular basis. Actually, I wouldn't get anything less than a 15 for those times when you're parked right next to a campground power pedestal. And that's going to be a lot easier for you to handle. Save the big cord, whatever the length that is, maybe it's 30 feet. Save that for times when you actually need it. So that's what I'd recommend there. What's the procedure for, let's see here, the heater switch on lithium batteries? We came back home to temperatures ranging from 20s to 40s each day. We hope to leave for warmer weather. Do we remove the batteries? Do we switch the heaters on and off each day? On battle-born batteries, which are the type that are factory installed in Airstreams these days when you get lithium, they come with heaters which are automatic. There's no need to switch them on and off. They just turn themselves on when they are required. There may be other brands of batteries where the switch is manual. I've never encountered a brand like that, but it's possible. But in general, the lithium batteries need some sort of heat when it gets below about 25 degrees Fahrenheit. And if it's below that temperature and they don't have built-in heaters, they won't charge. You can still use the batteries. They'll still discharge power, but you can't actually use you can't recharge those batteries until the temperature climbs back up. That's what the heater is for. So you can heat and discharge the batteries in colder temperatures. There we go. After a trip across I-40, I noticed that some of the rear taillight LEDs were out or not lighting. I can't figure out how to repair. Any suggestions? Marshall, this is an amazingly common problem. It could be that the taillight LEDs are starting to go bad. That is possible. If that's the case, there's really no fix for it other than to replace the entire LED assembly. You can't replace individual bulbs in those LEDs. You have to replace the entire assembly as one unit. Kind of expensive and a bit of a pain in the neck. However, if you're just saying, hey, my brake lights are out, my turn signals are out, or they're not working reliably, far more likely the solution is right here. This is your 7-way cord. When these copper connectors, and you can look at the picture, you see they look kind of brownish, they look dull colored. The more dull they get, the darker, maybe even black or other colors, the less they're going to conduct electricity. And so they need to be cleaned. I've been advocating this one for years. You need to clean the 7-way connectors. And if you get weird messages on your tow vehicle about the trailer lights working sometimes and not other times, or if you're having problems with the lights going out, this is the first place to look. We sell a kit on the Airstream Life store called the Maintenance Essentials Kit, which includes the tools you need to clean this. Whether you buy our kit or do it yourself some other way, I do recommend that people maintain the 7-way cord because it's a real common source of problems. We also have a blog on this subject. If you go to our store website, which is airgear.store, and you go look at the menu for the blog page, you will find all kinds of informative blogs that we've written about these common problems. In this case, you want to look for the one that's called What You Need to Know About the Trailer Plug. And you'll get more pictures and more description about the process of cleaning the 7-way cord and a bunch of other things you may not have known about the 7-way cord. So again, airgear.store, look for the blogs. And you can search on them and find blogs on all kinds of topics. We've been writing these blogs for years. We've covered a lot of stuff there. Next question. We'll be traveling across the Midwest and West in late August, September, not adverse to dry camping, but worried about the heat. We have solar panels. Assuming there's been sun and we use the battery sparingly for other things, how long can we expect the AC to run before running down the battery? Lori, I got bad news for you. AC doesn't run on batteries. You can't run an air conditioner on your batteries on any new Airstream unless it's been modified or it's the brand new 2024 Globetrotter that they just introduced. Otherwise, not going to happen. So the answer is 0. You can't run your AC on the batteries. You need to plug in. And if you're going to be camping in hot weather, be prepared for the hot weather. Lots of fans, lots of cool drinks, cold, wet towels, stay out of the Airstream during the day, whatever strategy you have, but you're not going to be running your air conditioner on the battery. Sorry. We want to replace lead acid batteries with a pair of 100 amp hour battle-born batteries along with a smart shunt. The smart shunt's the thing I talked about a little bit earlier. I'll be talking more about that because it comes up again and again. Can I use the original converter / inverter, or do I need to upgrade? Tom, you have a 2005. 2005s did not come with converters that can handle lithium batteries. You, unfortunately, are going to have to replace the entire converter. You can't even swap out a motherboard or do a minor upgrade on it. The whole converter has to come out because it just doesn't have the ability to be upgraded to lithium charging profiles. That's a bummer because taking out the converter is a fairly complex job involving a lot of wires. If you're not real handy with AC wiring, kind of a junior electrician, then you should probably get an electrician to do this job for you, well, or an RV electric specialist. But yeah, you're going to have to replace the entire converter. If you have an inverter, you do not need to replace that because an inverter is going to attach to the batteries. It doesn't care what kind of batteries it's attached to. But the converter / charger is the thing I think you're talking about, and the converter charger does have to go. We've got details about lithium battery upgrades because a lot of people ask questions about lithium batteries. It's a real hot topic right now. Go again to our website, airgear.store, and look for the Diary of a Lithium Battery Upgrade. It's under the guides section. It's like a 3-page documentation thing with lots of pictures, talks all about the considerations that you might run into if you're considering going to lithium on an existing Airstream. And it specifically tells you if you have these model years, here's what you need to do. If you have these model years, you're going to do this, and so on. So I put a lot of detail into that. I hope it's helpful. I had battleboard lithium batteries installed by the dealer for his new delivery. Congratulations. It has the factory 300-watt solar panel option. Victron panel indicates 13.6 volts. How do I know the batteries are charging? Good news, you got a new Airstream, came with battle-born batteries. It's already all set to charge those batteries at the proper voltage. You don't need to do anything. However, you can check your Victron panel, and it will show you. Now, it's not going to look exactly like this. This is from the Victron app on a mobile phone, but you see on the app, it shows the voltage. And you said your panel is showing 13.6 volts. That's what the batteries should show when they are fully charged. So if they get 13.6 when they're fully charged, then you've already got your answer. How should I manage my batteries when the Airstream is stored for 8 weeks? Factory indicates remove and replace on battery tender. Just ordered my new batteries after a year and a half. Well, Robert, you had a 22 Flying Cloud, and the batteries only lasted a year and a half. So I know you learned the lesson painfully already that if you let those batteries die in storage repeatedly, they're not going to last long. And that's exactly what happened to you. A year and a half, and the batteries were toast. Unfortunately, all too common. It's even happened to me because I had to store in an offsite place where there was no power, and the batteries would die in a few weeks. I've written a blog on this subject too. It's called "Why Do My Batteries Keep Dying in Storage?" Or "Why Do My Airstream Batteries Keep Dying?" You'll find it in the blog section. It explains exactly why this happened. But to get to your question, the factory is correct. If you can't plug in your Airstream, which is the thing that I would recommend, if you have power, leave your Airstream plugged in. If it's 2018 or later, you have the proper charger, it will not damage the batteries. Leave it plugged in. If you can't leave it plugged in, unfortunately, like many of us, and you have good solar panels, at least 200 watts on the roof, and you are not undercover, and the Airstream isn't covered in snow, and you get a reasonable amount of sunshine, you can probably get through on solar, but that is iffy in a lot of the country. Most people, you need to disconnect the batteries. Now, if you don't want to physically remove them from the Airstream, just disconnect the negative cables from the batteries. I know it's a pain. Make sure those batteries are completely electrically disconnected, and they should hold their charge for a few months. The factory suggests that you remove and replace them on battery tenders because that's the gold standard. If you take them home and you put them in your garage and you put them on battery tenders, you know those batteries are going to be fully charged when spring comes around, and you can put them back in your Airstream. So that is great advice. But it would be sufficient to completely electrically disconnect the batteries by removing the negative cables, as long as they're fully charged when you put them away, and you don't go maybe more than 4 months like that. I think that would be fine. We're headed to Mexico for 3 months, and here there may be times of low voltage. That could happen. Would the progressive EMS power protector be our best bet? Okay, and you said we do have a factory installed surge protector, which kind of mystifies me because Airstream didn't install surge protectors at the factory in 2020 Globetrotters. So not sure what you're referring to. Perhaps you had the factory install one after you bought the Airstream. But in any case, surge protector doesn't help you with low voltage at all. It's just for like a lightning strike or something like that. So yes, and not just if you're heading to Mexico. Honestly, low voltage is a problem everywhere in the United States, just as much as Mexico. During the summertime, when there's a lot of heat and everybody's running their air conditioners at the same time, low voltage is a real serious problem because it can cause your air conditioner to burn out. And that's why we recommend the progressive EMS power protector, because if the voltage goes too low and things might become damaged, it will cut off the power to protect your electronics and then turn it back on when the power is okay again. So yes, I highly recommend it. It's a product we've been selling for years in the Air Gear store, and it really has saved a lot of people, ourselves included. I purchased the gas stop while traveling and wanted to keep the refrigerator running to keep the cool with propane. Should the use function be turned on or keep it in the store position? In other words, doesn't using store turn off the propane? No, Sabrina, it doesn't have anything to do with it. If you're talking about that battery disconnect that has the use and store positions, that's just for the battery. It doesn't have anything to do with the propane. Now you have a travel trailer. So the only way to turn the propane off is to do it at the tanks, all right? This thing doesn't help you at all. Go to the tanks and close the rotating valves on the top of each tank. That's how you turn off the propane. However, since you want to keep your fridge running while you're traveling, you would obviously leave at least one tank open and have the gas stop in place to protect you in case there was an accident. But no, the U-Store switch won't help you at all. You might have been thinking of some motorhomes, Interstate motorhomes, Atlas motorhomes. They do have an electronic solenoid that turns off the propane, but that's a motorhome thing. Definitely not the case for your Flying Cloud. Okay, enough electrical questions. Let's move on to solar. And let's see, we're doing great on time. So, how often do solar panels need to be replaced? How many can I put on my trailer? I love easy questions. Robert, solar panels last a long, long time. 20 years is not an uncommon lifespan. They can even go much longer than that. So once you put them on, you can pretty much consider that it's a lifetime investment for your Airstream. And as far as how many you can put on as many as you can fit. There's really no upward limit to it except for physical space on the roof. Again, you have a 30-foot trailer, a lot of real estate on top of that trailer. If you wanted to get 600 watts or more on the roof and you were willing to squeeze panels into every available space, that would certainly be possible, I would think. The best thing to do is go to an RV solar specialist and have them evaluate the roof and put the panels on for you. But if you really want to go with a big array, that's you've got the space for it. I wouldn't recommend you do that unless you really, really need it. If you're a hardcore boondocker and you're out there for months at a time in quartzsite, maybe you really want to go nuts, but solar gets quite expensive. So I would only put on what you really need. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. We just completed a 3-week trip exploring Manitoba, and we boondocked. We watched your videos on solar batteries. My wife hesitates to use the lights at night, so we read and play cards by camping lantern. Now, please address whether or not you can carefully use lights at night when boondocking. It sounds like I'm getting dragged into a marital discussion here. Dangerous territory indeed. But in this case, I have to take the husband's attitude on this one. This is not medieval times. You have an Airstream. You do not have to live by candlelight or camping lantern. You have lights and you can use them. It's okay. The LED lights in any modern Airstream, and this is a 2021 Flying Cloud, are very low power. They're not the problem. If you're running out of power, it's probably not because of excessive light usage. It's probably something else like laptops, inverter, electric refrigerator. The 2021 Flying Cloud doesn't have an electric refrigerator, so that's not it. But those are some of the common problems that cause people to run out of batteries, or maybe the batteries are just no good anymore and need replacement. But please don't live like it's 2 centuries ago. There's no need. I'm sorry if I got in the middle of a marital battle, but I'm siding with the husband on this one. Just turn the lights on. I have 300 watts of solar panels on the roof and 2 battle-borne batteries. Yahoo! How long can I reasonably boondock without a generator? I don't know. It depends on how much power you use. You have a pretty good battery bank. That's 200 amp hours of batteries from those battle-bornes. And because they're lithium, you can use the entire battery bank. 200 amp hours is a pretty good amount of power for a lot of people. That's what we have in our trailer. We've boondocked for 4 days or more with no solar at all. So I would think if you've got some reasonable sunshine going on there, you do even better. The way you can know is to get a device like this thing that I've been talking about. This is the Victron Smart Shunt. Now, any amp hour meter will do the same job. I mentioned the Smart Shunt, and it's not because I sell it, because I don't, not anymore, but it's a great product. I mentioned the Smart Shunt because it's great, it's easy to use, and it's easy to install. You don't have to drill any holes in your Airstream. It literally sits atop the batteries and you just wire it in. It's not a complicated job to wire it in. And what it will do is give you the ability to monitor your power usage and the state of your batteries on your phone with an app. It's great. I showed the screen earlier, the little blue screen of the app. And so you don't have to put a monitor inside the Airstream on one of the walls. You don't have to drill any holes or run any wires. You do the whole thing in the battery box, and you can monitor the batteries. And that's what you need to do. You need to learn how much power you're using on your camping trips. And that will give you an idea of how to budget your power so you can boondock for long periods of time without using the generator. This knowledge is power, and this is knowledge about power, something that's really going to be very helpful. It's about $200. It's a DIY installation. It's not difficult. I really recommend it to a lot of people. Every time I go to pull the Airstream out of outdoor storage, the batteries are dead and the electric jack won't operate. What's the best solar charger to use? Trickle charger. I have 2 AGM batteries. Also, how do you hook it up? I don't have the solar connection. Now, Aaron, you have a 2014, and that is before Airstream started putting the handy little solar plug on the tongue. So that is true, but it's no problem to hook up a solar trickle charger. Now, this is an example of a cheap one that I've just found on Amazon. I'm not recommending this particular model. As a matter of fact, I've evaluated this particular model, and it's pretty crappy. But this is something similar to what you might get if you're looking for a solar trickle charger. It's a basic panel, a really basic charge controller, and a couple of alligator clips. You would clip those alligator clips right on the battery, and you'd put this thing maybe on top of the propane tank cover. Somebody might steal it. I think it costs less than $50. It won't do a very good job, though. I'm really not a fan of solar trickle chargers. The batteries in an Airstream, your 2 AGM batteries, they still have a fair amount of power on them. They're about 160 amp hours of power in those 2 batteries, give or take, depending on which brand you have. I wouldn't recommend a solar trickle charger of less than 50 watts if you're going to leave your Airstream in storage and count on this thing. 50 watts bare minimum. And that gets into a fairly large panel, especially when you're looking at cheap panels. The one pictured here is about the size of the propane tank cover, but it's only 30 watts. It just won't do the job, because you have to account for the fact that it's not going to charge at night. It's not going to do much charging in the morning or the afternoon because it's pointed straight up. And it's not going to do much charging on a cloudy day. And it's not going to do any charging if you get snowed on, and so on and so on. So you need a lot more capacity than you might think to maintain the batteries on solar. That's why I'm not crazy about solar trickle chargers. For most people, they just don't work. Not unless you get a really big one, and then you've got the risk of it being stolen. So again, if you're going to try to maintain in storage, especially during the winter time, rooftop panels are better. At least you can put a 200, 300 watts on the roof, and nobody's going to steal them off your roof. So if you can't plug in, that's the next best thing. Solar panel manufacturers claim a rating that other independent testers say doesn't even come close to the actual rating. So how can they market something that's not true? Well, welcome to the world. That's just what happens, I'm sorry to say. And who do you believe? Well, I don't really believe anybody until I test them. I've tested a lot of solar panels because we do sell a portable solar kit. That's actually what's in the picture yet. And that picture is a 200-watt solar panel kit. So let me tell you something about watt ratings. They're really just for comparison. If you have a 200-watt panel or a 100-watt panel, you're not going to get that wattage out of it most of the time. You might get close once in a while, but most of the time you're going to get a lot less power out of it. And that has to do with many factors, such as sun angle and time of day, the cloudiness, of course. The temperature even has an impact. There's many, many factors that impact how well that solar panel can perform. So when you look at ratings, use them for comparison only. And as far as how they can market something that's not true, I have to tell you, it's rampant in the RV industry for solar panels, just rampant. I'm going to refer you to a blog that we wrote. It's called Why Your Solar Panels Are Doing Less Than You Think. And again, you'll find this at airgear.store in our blog area. Read this blog. We tested 3 sets of portable solar panels side by side on the exact same moment, on the exact same day, the exact same conditions. Plugged all 3 of them in one at a time, and they had widely varying outputs between 100 and 150 watts at that particular point. That's a huge difference, and it really goes back to the quality of portable solar panels. A lot of them are really crappy. Again, why I don't like the cheap Amazon solar trickle chargers, because that 30-watt panel might put out 10 watts. It just underscores that it's worth paying for quality. If you're going to go buy a portable solar kit and you're going to spend less than $500 on a 200 or 100 watt kit, trust me, you're not going to get the performance you're paying for. There is an equivalency. Cheap solar panels don't work well. It pays to pay a little bit more for high quality solar panels. And I know it's not something you can see. You're going to just have to sort of look for reliable brands. This is why at Air Gear, we sell our own portable solar panel kit, because we've tested it. We know they're good panels. We know it performs well. It's the only one we're going to stand behind. So read the blog. You'll learn a lot more about that subject. I have approximately 180 watt solar panels on the roof. I store it outside in the sunlight all day. It's not plugged into shore power. How soon before a road trip can I turn on the refrigerator without fear of draining my batteries? Good question, Rick. So let's assume your batteries are fully charged and you want to turn on the fridge before you go on your trip. And you know that electric refrigerator, because you have a 2023, it's got an electric fridge. That thing kills batteries like crazy. Pulls about 60 watts when it's running. If you didn't have solar and you turned on that electric refrigerator, you'd probably get 2 days of power from good batteries before you started to run low on battery power. You don't want that to happen. I get it. So you're hoping your solar panels on the roof will help you out, and they will. I think, Rick, that's going to buy you at least another day safely. Of course, many factors are involved here. Is it sunny when you do it? If it's a cloudy day, all bets are off. If it's December, you're not going to do as well on the solar as you would in June. So I can't give you an exact number on this one, but I'm telling you that the 180 watts in solar panels definitely buys you some time. I wouldn't feel bad at all about turning on a refrigerator 24 hours before the road trip without any fear of draining the batteries. You will probably lose some battery power, but you're probably going to get it back during your tow anyway, or when you get to your campground and plug in. So it's not a bad situation you're in. I would say a day or so. All right, let's move on to plumbing. Got a lot of plumbing questions here. Here's somebody who wants to install an additional sewer hose tube next to the factory installed sewer hose tube, and he wants to know where to mount it. He says, if the factory tube is attached to a beam or cross member, can I attach the new one to the same beam? I don't want to weaken the chassis structure or drill into anything above. I understand. Let's take a look at my picture here. This is the underside of my Airstream, and you can see the axle, and you can see the frame, which is black over by the wheels, exposed part of frame. You can see some propane lines at the top of the picture, and you can see where I've circled some rivets. Those rivets are in a row. Those rivets are indicating where a steel frame member is. We've riveted the belly pan up to that frame member. My recommendation is that you attach anything that you're going to add to a frame member. You don't want to attach it to the belly pan where there is no frame, because it's going to be hanging just on that thin aluminum belly pan. It's likely to tear out at some point. So you want to drill into the frame. You will not weaken the chassis. No danger of that at all. So go up there and kind of tap on the aluminum or look for rivet lines to give you an indication of where there's a frame member, and I would attach it in the same point. If you can get into that steel frame, it's a little hard to drill into. but you'll get a nice, secure, solid connection, and you don't have to worry about hitting anything particularly sensitive. The gas lines, for example, are always below the belly pan where you can see them, so you're not going to hit a gas line. There's not much else up there. The tanks are suspended below. You're not going to drill into a tank. Mostly you're going to drill into insulation. Wherever we're hooked up to city water, the water pressure and volume are too low to activate the tankless water heater. And then they go on to explain that they've taken off some things to check the pressure. Now, this one, normally I wouldn't try to diagnose this, but it does get to a very common set of problems that people encounter here. The water heater. This Flying Cloud, this 2023 Flying Cloud, like a lot of the recent Airstreams since I think 2021 or so, have a tankless water heater made by Girard. These things are famous for intermittently not providing hot water. I've got a lot of questions about this. This is just one of them. So there's two things that you can look at. First of all, you're implying here that the pressure is too low, but I don't know if you've actually checked the pressure inside the Airstream and said, yeah, it's just barely dribbling out, or if it's actually coming in pretty well through the faucets and you just think it's too low to activate the water heater. So I can't tell you specifically what your issue is, but here's two things to look at. First of all, the pressure regulator in your Airstream is built into the city water fill, which is the thing that's shown on the left there. That pressure regulator, I've never heard of one failing, but if you had a bad pressure regulator, it would be built into this device and you would simply replace the entire water fill. It's about a $35 product. Well, it may be more these days. That was the last time I looked at it. It might be a $60 product now. But it's possible, although I think rather unlikely, that the pressure regulator on your Airstream has gone bad, in which case replace that. Far more likely, I think the pressure is fine, and the real problem is the Girard water heater, which people don't understand. The factory setting is too high. The way this tankless water heater works, it relies on a certain flow of water through it. If it doesn't get enough water volume, it shuts down. And it's looking specifically for water through the heater. So in other words, the water that it's trying to make hot, it has to flow about a gallon a minute at a minimum, or it's not going to activate. It's going to actually shut off. So if you're running hot water, but you're running it very slowly, you're going to find it just disappears and becomes cold water. The solution is to lower the temperature on the Girard, bring it down to about 105, 104 degrees max. That's going to force the water heater to run more. I know it seems counterintuitive, but trust me on this one. Lower the temperature on the Girard to about 104, 105. See if that fixes your problem. Also, if you're in the shower, don't use the little knob on the shower handle that cuts off the power or the water flow and makes it just dribble. If you want to save water, just shut it off completely at the faucet handle and then turn it back on. Because when you use that little dribbler thing, it's going to lower the flow way below 1 gallon per minute, and the water heater will shut off, and now you have a line full of cold water coming at you. So give that a shot before you start replacing parts, and let's see what happens. Got a number of questions like this one. Why does my water pump pulse sometimes when I turn on a faucet? And then, it seems more likely when I run the water at less than full volume. How do you fix this annoying loud pulsing? Doesn't sound like it would be good for the water pump. 2 or 3 people wrote in with very similar questions, wondering about the pulsing. Pulsing is normal from a RV water pump. That's the way they work. The cheaper ones tend to make more vibration, noise, and pulsing than the more expensive ones, but to some extent, they all do this, and it is actually normal. It doesn't hurt the water pump at all. It's just the way it's made. The water pump is just doing that. And yes, if you run the water at low volume, it does tend to get a little bit louder sometimes. It also gets louder when the freshwater tank is low on water because it's having to work a little bit harder, and so it tends to be noisier. There's no fix other than maybe you can try a different water pump from a different brand that's a little bit quieter. But I'll warn you, before you start swapping in $200 water pumps, to some extent, they all do this, and it's just the nature of the beast. Our freshwater measurement is way off sometimes. It's often will show 44% full or 56% full when we just drain the tank. Is there any practical way to fix this, or we just live with it? That's not normal. It is common for them to be somewhat off, and sometimes these sea level monitors, I've noticed they can lag a minute or two behind the actual. So if you're seeing that it's reading wrong and you know it's wrong, but then 3 or 4 minutes later it's reading right again, I wouldn't consider that to be a major problem. That seems to be something that they do. But if yours is way off, and that's way off, I mean, showing a half a tank when the tank is empty is way off. You may need to have service done on the sea level monitors. The way this thing works, it has a series of probes that are mounted on the sides of the tank. And those probes do sometimes go bad. There's a way to put this thing into a diagnostic mode where it will tell you how many of those probes are still working, which may be useful to you. I can't explain how to do that on this call, but if you have a copy of my nearly complete guide to Airstream maintenance, it's described in there how to put it into maintenance mode. You could also check your sea level owner's manual or read some online documentation, and you can find this information. But look for the diagnostic mode and see if you can find out if the probes have actually gone bad. If less than a certain number of these probes are working, there's multiple probes, like there might be 6 probes mounted on the tank. And if, if like 3 of them are working, at that point, the monitor will start to get inaccurate. And the only solution is to have those probes replaced, which is definitely a service center visit, not really a good DIY job. Is it advisable to add a pressure accumulator to our water pump? Advisable? No. Necessary? Absolutely not. If you want to, sure, go ahead. What an accumulator tank does is add a certain amount of pressure to the system to try to smooth out that pulsing that we were talking about and make the water flow a little bit more evenly. It's like a little additional pressure tank. I've tried them. I'm not impressed with the results that you get. I don't recommend them. It won't hurt. But honestly, it's not going to make a big difference in the situation, and the pump will still make noise. So, not really crazy about them. Tire questions. Always a popular topic. If the tire is, say, in the the temperature is in the low 30s, and the tire pressure, what he's saying here is that it got cold, and the tire pressure went down in the cold. This guy normally runs at 78 PSI, but he's checking the tires in the morning and go, wow, there's only 70 PSI because it's so cold. He knows it's going to get warmer during the day. Does he need to pump the tires back up to 78 cold? And that is a judgment call. That big of a difference? Yes. If you've moved into a climate where it's much colder in the morning, you should check your tire pressure when the tires are cold. The tire pressure will naturally go up as the heat goes up, as you run the tire on the road. They will warm up. That's accounted for by the manufacturer of the tire. So you don't have to then go take out air in the afternoon, but you should check your tire pressure when when the tires are at their coldest. So an 8 PSI difference is pretty significant. I would add at least a few PSI to get those tires up. If you're starting in the 30s, even if it's going to be 55, 65 degrees later that day, I would definitely add some air to those tires. It may not be a problem not to add air because you still have spare load carrying capacity, even at 70 PSI, but you don't have as much margin should you have a slow leak or something like that happen. So I would recommend adding a little bit of air there. Winterizing and cold weather questions. So it's the season, and I understand we got a lot of questions on this one. My Airstream's in a covered, enclosed, non-heated garage in Pennsylvania with electricity access. Nice. Winterized with fluids. Okay. Do I need to keep the power cord plugged in? Do I need to turn the trailer? Do I turn the trailer on inside the power inside the trailer? What's needed for the batteries? Well, as I said before, if you've got power, and he's got a 2022, the Marcia. Marcia, I would recommend you leave your Airstream plugged in because you've got power. It's the best of all situations. You're in a nice enclosed place. Keeping power to the Airstream will keep the batteries fully charged. And it really doesn't matter in this situation if you have the battery disconnect switch on or off on your correction. It does matter. If you have a Caravelle, it has an electronic battery switch. In that case, it doesn't matter what position the switch is. The batteries will charge when the trailer is plugged in regardless. However, if you had a Bambi or a Base Camp or certain other trailers that have a mechanical switch, it's an on-off switch instead of use store, those need to be in the on position for the batteries to charge. So in general, I would just say leave it in the use position, leave it in the on position, plug the trailer in, and you are good to go. Oh, I forgot to mention, got a lot of winterizing questions. We wrote up this guide. It's called The Simple Guide to Winterizing an Airstream. It answers so many of the questions that people were asking. So if I don't get to your question in this discussion, please go to airgear.store and look for The Simple Guide to Winterizing an Airstream. It's a free download. We don't ask you for your email or anything. There's no strings attached. I strongly recommend you go get that, and it will answer so many of these questions that people asked over and over and over again. So go get that. What recommendations do you have for those of us in mild climates, such as Georgia, who want to use our Airstream during winter months as a casita or guest house? How do we keep it always ready for guests without winterizing? I've been there. Living in Arizona, I wanted to do the same thing. We have a few nights once in a while where it does get cold. And, excuse me. And on those nights, I don't want the Airstream to freeze. If you're in a position like that where it freezes occasionally at night, but it's not a super hard freeze, like it's not going below 20, and you want to keep your Airstream unwinterized, the simple solution, if you have power, is a space heater. Get a basic space heater, open up all the cabinet doors so the plumbing's exposed underneath the kitchen and underneath the bathroom sink, any cabinets, any closets, open everything up, run the space heater, keep the interior of the Airstream 60, 70 degrees, and that should be enough to keep the plumbing everywhere in the Airstream safely above the freezing temperature. Your mileage may vary. If it's windy and your Airstream sitting out in an exposed field, this may not be enough. So I'm not going to promise you that this works under all conditions. It worked for me when I was kept my Airstream in a place where it was protected by walls and the wind couldn't blow underneath it. And we never really had freezes below 24, 25 degrees. This strategy works great. If you're facing harder freezes than that, I think you're at some risk, because even though the interior of the Airstream may be warm enough, it's possible that some plumbing down below the floor could freeze. So you do have to make a judgment call on this one. But this is the easy solution for people who are in a fairly temperate climate and only face minor freezes once in a while. And by the way, that's very nice. People love the Airstream casitas. When winterizing, will there be any water in the lines from the tankless water heater? If yes, is there a way to remove the water? If the water cannot be removed, is there any risk to the water heater freezing? Well, if there was water left in the lines of the tankless water heater, yes, freezing could be a significant issue, could cause real damage. Again, this is the kind of thing we address in our simple guide to winterizing an Airstream. What we're going to recommend to you, I'll just give it away. This is a spoiler. We recommend using RV antifreeze in every case. Whether you blow out the lines or not, there is a possibility of water still being somewhere in there. RV antifreeze is sort of a belt and suspenders approach. Make sure that any water that is still left in the lines is diluted with RV antifreeze, and then it won't freeze. Yes, it's very important to get all the water out of the tankless water heater. Running RV antifreeze through the tankless water heater will force any water out, and you know you're protected in that situation. We live in Colorado and are planning to upgrade to lithium batteries before next spring. The Airstream's in storage and winter temps drop to 0 at times. Should the lithium batteries be removed and stored in a warmer setting, or is it okay to leave them installed? Well, since you haven't actually made the upgrade, my suggestion would be to put the lithium batteries in next spring when it's warm. But if you really want to do it over the winter, get the job out of the way, I understand. In that case, lithium batteries that are fully charged can be stored well down to 15, 20 degrees below 0 without any damage, as long as they're kept charged. If you put the batteries in the Airstream, you electrically disconnect them by removing the negative cables, those batteries will be fine all winter long. And you can check Battleborn's website. They have guidance on this, but they're going to say the same thing. Storing lithium batteries in very cold temperatures, 15 degrees below 0 or so, is not a problem. The only reason to remove them in this situation is if you want to make sure, well, I'm really not sure why you would need to do it, honestly. If they're fully charged and they're disconnected from power, they're fine where they are. That's the short answer. A lot of other questions. This can be some of the more interesting ones. So let's dive in here. Which Airstream model do you own? Which models have you owned previously? Oh, finally, an actual AMA question. I love it. Brian, I don't know why you care what Airstreams I've owned, but thank you for asking. I have currently, Toti and I have a 2020 Airstream Globetrotter 23 FB, which we love. That's it in the picture there at Devil's Tower. We have taken it all over the country, and it's the best Airstream I've ever owned. I am so happy with it. I've previously had a number of vintage trailers. I had a 1968 Caravelle, was my first Airstream. That's a 17-footer. Did a lot of work on that and learned a lot. A 53 Flying Cloud, which I sold to a movie star and didn't restore, so I never actually used that one. A 54 Flying Cloud, which I was going to restore and then never did, and sold that one too. A 77 Argosy, which I did restore, and that was the Vintage Thunder project. If you were a subscriber to Airstream Life back around 2006, 2007, you heard all about Vintage Thunder. We took a 77 Argosy 24 and completely redid it. It came out beautiful. We painted it a crazy color, and it's still living in Connecticut with a happy owner today. So that one's still on the road. And I had a 2005 Safari Bunkhouse 30. So very similar to your International Serenity 30, which I full-timed in and had for 15 years. So that one was kind of a long run there. I've loved all my Airstreams, even the ones that I couldn't actually use. But I've learned that, it can be a dangerous habit to start collecting Airstreams. So having just one today is a good thing. Where do we get the as-built drawings of our Airstream? For example, our hot water shutoff valve is not where the manual says it is, and the inverter is not where it says it is. Stephanie, I feel your pain. Frequently, and I hate to throw Airstream under the bus here, but frequently the owner's manuals do have small errors in them. My owner's manual says there's a low point drain where there isn't, and there's a winterization valve that you can't get to, and there's a couple of other things I found that are wrong in the owner's manual too. This is just, unfortunately, the errors that creep in, and it just happens. But there is no such thing as an as-built drawing for an Airstream. These are production-built trailers. They're not like houses where they have to file an as-built drawing with the city hall. As-built is as you got it. So what my recommendation is, when you do find things that are not where the manual says, you make a note right in the manual as to where it actually is and where the manual is wrong, and maybe even send an email to Airstream service letting them know that you found that error. They might want to know, they might not. But I'm afraid that's just sort of the nature of the beast. Can you please explain the advantages and disadvantages of using a standalone GPS unit for navigation versus simply relying on a navigation cell phone app like Google Maps or Waze or whatever? You've got a 2023. I'm guessing you're a new Airstreamer, because if you've been Airstreaming for a little while, you will not ask this question, because the answer is simple. Cell phones just don't work everywhere. And it's great when you're in the city. It's great in a lot of parts of the country. In the East Coast, there's pretty good cell coverage. But when you start traveling around the country and going to national parks and remote state parks and Western BLM land and all kinds of other places, you're going to find that that cell phone just doesn't work. So that's why we all have standalone GPS units. And everybody I've known who's sworn to me up and down that they've always had great service and great reliability with their cell phone, usually a year or two later, they come back to me and say, oh, wow, let me tell you what happened. It's not a good idea. Plus, it's really convenient to have a standalone unit right on the dashboard, not your cell phone, because you want to use your cell phone for other things. I strongly recommend any dedicated GPS unit over using a cell phone app when you're navigating with your Airstream. Enough said. How can I address significant filiform corrosion of virtually every surface of my trailer? Airstream will not advise any corrective action other than panel replacement, which is prohibitively expensive. I agree. User solution forums are all over the map with solutions, most of which I've proven unsatisfactory. I know, Mike, I've been there. The picture shows a little bit of filiform corrosion happening around some rivets on my Airstream. You can see it looks like white spider webs and, dust, something like that. Filiform corrosion happens. What is moisture getting under a break in the clear coat, and that's why it happens around rivets and door handles and places where the Airstream might have been scratched. Taillights are a major area. Once the moisture gets under the clear coat, it begins to corrode the aluminum, and it spreads in this very distinctive filiform pattern. There is only one way to stop it, and that is to go to a place with less humidity. Once the humidity drops below about 60%, the filiform stops proceeding. Once the humidity gets high again under that part of the body panel the filiform will begin to spread against. So if you live in a high humidity area, if you travel or camp frequently near the ocean, those things will greatly accelerate filiform corrosion. If you tow in the winter and there's road salt in your area, that's a huge problem. You will get filiform corrosion. It can be pretty bad. The other bad news is there's no way to correct it. That's really practical. Airstream is right. Once it happens, it happens. It's under the clear coat. And the only way to remove it, theoretically, would be to remove the clear coat, which is extremely difficult to do. It involves lots of nasty chemicals that cause cancer, and then buff off the filiform and then somehow clear coat the Airstream again. It's just not practical. People will talk about, for little tiny spots like these, they'll talk about maybe taking off the clear coat with something abrasive and then using a little clear nail polish. You can do that for tiny touch-ups and it will look okay, maybe, but it's not practical for filiform all over the trailer. Filiform happens. It's a natural outcome of a clear-coated aluminum trailer. I'm sorry, but if it's really bad, there really is no practical solution other than panel replacement. That's why Airstream said it. It's not for legal reasons. It's just because that's the reality of the thing. So user solutions are all over the map, and they do mostly prove unsatisfactory because honestly, there isn't really a good fix for this. Other than staying in low humidity areas and staying away from salt. Definitely stay away from salt. If you can't by the beach, take your Airstream to a car wash immediately after. Don't wait till you get home. Do not pass go. Go right to some sort of truck wash and get that salt. Even if you can't see it, there's salt spray on your trailer. Get it rinsed off right away. That will help quite a bit. We also have a little bit more detail about this in a blog. Quick guide to maintaining your Airstream's exterior. So if you have other exterior questions, I recommend looking that blog up too. You should never suggest covering an Airstream with a soft fabric cover. There must be a logical reason. Why not? You're right, Steve. There is a reason. There's actually several reasons why we don't recommend this. First of all, any kind of cover that's on the Airstream during storage can be blown by the wind. And you can just imagine a flapping motion in the wind over and over and over again, even with a soft cover, could cause an abrasion point where you're going to go back to your Airstream, take that cover off and see a couple of spots where the clear coat has been scratched. You will have a heart attack if that happens. So that's one reason why I don't suggest it. The other reason is that covers, some covers can trap humidity underneath. And we just talked about filiform corrosion. So imagine if it gets humid, there's humidity coming up from the ground. The ground is always a little bit moist, unless you're in the desert here. And that humidity comes up, it gets trapped underneath there, and that's going to accelerate filiform corrosion dramatically. So those are two big reasons why we don't suggest covering an Airstream with any kind of cover at all. It's just the downsides are much worse than any positive that you might get out of it. We store our trailer in our driveway and like to go in it from time to time. Me too. We both like to do that. When not traveling for a while, is it recommended to leave the stabilizer jacks raised? We've heard conflicting answers. No, there's absolutely no problem with leaving the stabilizer jacks down. They're not going to wear out. They're not going to get squeaky. They're not going to bend. Go ahead, put the stabilizers down as long as you like. No problem at all. We put the stabilizers down when we have ours in storage at our home driveway for the same reason. It's just nicer when you're going in and out a lot. And if you have guests using it as a casita, guest house, that's another reason to put the stabilizers down. So no problem. What's the proper way to use and apply Parbond brand sealer? Pretty much like every other sealant. That's a tube of Parbond in the picture. Hal has a 2001 Safari, so there's a lot of points on that Airstream, that era of Airstream, where things are attached to the outside of the Airstream, like the water fill or a little access hatch or something like that. Something that's plastic. It's attached to the outside of the Airstream. Airstream used sealant around the edges of those things so that rainwater wouldn't come inside. Periodically, that sealant needs to be replaced. Parbond is an excellent sealant. If you can find it in silver color for sealing things like that, it's very easy to apply. It goes on like any other sealant. Clean the area completely, remove any prior sealant completely, then just squeeze in your tube of sealant and run it up and down all the gaps, and voila, all set. If you have a later model Airstream made in the last several years, most of those places where sealant was required have been replaced with neoprene gaskets, which never need sealant. So putting sealant over the neoprene gasket is redundant and you don't need to do it. That's like around clearance lights, things like that. You'll see a little bit of black neoprene there. That is the sealant. In that case, you don't put additional sealant on it. If it started to leak, you would replace the neoprene gasket. When I'm at an RV site where the low temperature overnight is 20 to 30 degrees for several continuous nights, how do I avoid having frozen or busted water pipes? Okay, so you're camping, Rick. You're camping. You're in the trailer. Your Airstream's built for that. Not a problem. Make sure you run the furnace. That's all you got to do. Furnace, not heat pump. The heat pump's not going to work at those temperatures anyway. When you run the furnace on an Airstream, on most Airstreams, there's a little duct from the furnace that directs warm air down to the water tank and to other pipes that are underneath the floor to keep them from freezing. So Airstream already thought of this problem. Running the furnace guarantees that those places are going to stay reasonably warm and they won't freeze. If on some other Airstreams, Airstream didn't run a duct, instead they gave you an electric heat blanket, which you can turn on with a switch. But either way, there's a technique for it. Any Airstream is made to take 20, 25, 30 degrees, no problem. I hear from a lot of people who are afraid, oh my God, it's getting below freezing. What's going to happen? If you're comfortable in the Airstream, the rest of the Airstream is comfortable too. Not to worry, made to take it. If an exterior panel needs to be replaced, how concerned should I be that they do not remove the interior panels to replace the exterior panel so that they can use the same rivets? So what they're talking about, Jeff, here, is the difference between a bucked rivet, which is the kind of rivet that is used to make the exterior of an Airstream, it's put on there, versus what's called an Olympic rivet, which is used put on with a pop rivet tool. And a buck rivet, if you want to replace it, you have to have access to both the inside and the outside of the panel at the same time. So they have to take all the interior alumina out, get access to both sides of that panel so they can put that buck rivet in. That's the way the factory made it. If you're having an exterior panel replaced, sometimes it's a lot cheaper to not remove those interior panels, because that usually means taking all the furniture out of the Airstream. Big labor job. And instead putting in an Olympic rivet, which can be installed strictly from the outside. The difference between Olympic rivets and bucked rivets is described in a blog that I wrote. Has that Airstream been damaged and repaired? And that's going to do a better job of explaining it with pictures as to the difference between those two types of rivets and how to decide which one you want to have done for a repair. The bottom line is Olympic rivets are a lot less expensive and will save you money. If you're paying for that repair yourself, then you may choose to go with Olympic rivets, and they're perfectly good if they're well installed. If you want the factory style of rivet and you want things to be exactly the same, then you may insist on bucked rivets. It's going to be a lot more labor, and you might have to argue with the insurance company a little bit, but that's the difference. Read that blog and you'll understand all the key elements there. Is there an easier way to securely close the door without having to push or slam the door hard? From the outside, it just takes a solid push. Recently taken to Airstream dealer for an adjustment. Well, Edward, slamming Airstream doors is one of the famous pastimes of almost every Airstreamer. Sometimes they close beautifully like butter. You just push it close and it's just click and it just closes. And when that happens, I have a warm feeling in my heart for Airstream. The rest of the time, I have to slam my door. Why does it work sometimes and not other times? Here's why. Your Airstream is flexible. It's made out of aluminum. It's designed to bend a little bit. So when you go down the road, it bounces and moves. You can't see it. But when you go to a campground and you put it on the stabilizers, it's quite possible that you're ever so slightly tweaking the body of the Airstream. And it might just happen from differences in temperatures or, any kind of factor. The point is that the Airstream moves. So sometimes you have to slam the door and sometimes you can just push the door. And if you're consistently having problems, it's really awful, then yes, take it to the Airstream dealer. There are adjustments that can be done to the door. I describe these adjustments in my book, Really Complete Guide to Airstream Maintenance, about how you can do some DIY adjustments to the door that may help. But that's usually for severe cases. If it's a minor slam, and sometimes it's difficult to open and sometimes it's not, probably you're not going to be able to tweak it to ultimate perfection. I've never met an Airstream that didn't have to be slammed at least sometimes, at least an Airstream aluminum trailer. Different for the fiberglass trailers, different from the motorhomes. But the aluminum trailers, it's just something that you learn to live with. Sorry about that, but
you're at time.
Okay, I'm almost out of time. Actually, I am out of time. Huh? 1 hour and 7 minutes. I've just got a couple more questions. Let me see if I can dash through a couple more. All right, here we go. Why does the fridge not stay cold while on propane? Terry, if it stays cold on electric, but it doesn't stay cold on propane, you probably have a gas problem in the gas burner, which is what this picture is showing. That's the gas burner in a refrigerator. It's quite a small flame. It can get out of adjustment. It can get dirty. Take it to an RV technician who's qualified to work on propane refrigerators. Make sure that they understand propane refrigerators well. They can clean or adjust that burner. If it's cold on electric and just not cold on propane, this is where you want to look. We bought our trailer about 9 months ago, stored indoors, very well maintained. Previous owner never had the exterior resealed, no evidence of any leaks, but wondering if I need to get it resealed, or if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Well, I got to tell you, this one could put me on a big rant here, because I hate it when people advocate for resealing the exterior of the Airstream when there's no actual problem. Airstreams do not need to be routinely resealed unless there's a problem with the sealant. It's gapping, it's leaking, it's been damaged, something's been removed and replaced, then yes, you need to take care of the sealant. But if it's not leaking and you haven't had any damage, there is no reason to replace the sealant on the roof of your Airstream. So if it ain't broke, don't fix it is a way to look at it. I look at it a little bit differently. This is my motto now. If it ain't broke, you better inspect it. So I'm not saying ignore that sealant, but I'm saying go up on the roof, take a look at it, find out if it's gapping, loose, damaged, anything like that. If it is, take care of it. But if you inspect it and it all looks good, you're good. There's no reason to replace the sealant on a routine basis. So if it ain't broke, you better inspect it, is what I'm going to say here. Okay, I think that's the end of my prepared slides. We were going to go to some chat, but unfortunately, we don't have the ability to do chat. I want to remind you of some great resources. When you have questions, people don't realize you can call Airstream for help, and they will answer and they will help you. They're really great. So you don't just have to go to your dealer. If you're under the 2-year warranty, yes, go to your dealer, make them fix the problem that you're having. But if you just have a general question, call this number, write this number down. It's in your owner's manual anyway, but just put it somewhere, 937-596-6111. It's engraved into my brain. And believe it or not, those people who answer the phone really know their stuff. They're great. They've got 15, 20 years experience at Airstream. They can answer your question, even the most arcane questions. There's also online support airstream.com. But I will remind you that if you're within the 2-year warranty, when you have a problem, don't go to an online forum or Facebook to ask your question. Contact somebody who actually knows. One of these 3 things. If you're still within the 2-year warranty, use that warranty and get things fixed. I also want a couple of reminders here. This video is going to be posted to YouTube in a couple of days. We're going to put in links to all the blogs that I mentioned in the YouTube notes. So if you didn't have a chance to write things down, go back to YouTube in a couple of days and check out this video, and we will have all that in the notes, so you don't have to watch it again. And again, thank you for your patronage of Air Gear, airgear.store. We love helping you guys. We love answering these questions. I hope this has been helpful, and I want to wish all of you guys happy travels.